All right, we're talking about accord and satisfaction now. And again, we are coming at you from a different course now. This is cause of action and civil defenses, okay? And these next series of videos are going to be predicated off of that. And what we're going to go into next is the next lesson. Accord and satisfaction, which what happens to be one of my favorite subjects because I started studying accord and satisfaction roughly about 11 years ago, okay? When I started studying negotiable instruments, mortgages, bills of exception, IBOEs, bills of exchange, Title 18, subsection 8, all obligations are obligations of the United States, Title 31, 5118, started studying all this stuff, okay? So when I started studying letters of credit, negotiable instruments, I started to learn about accord and satisfaction, which is also accepted for value, A for V, if you will. Accord and satisfaction, what we're about to cover now, I will blend this with what they're saying here, with what I know and what I've executed and what I have utilized to discharge debts, okay? Accord and satisfaction of defense. An accord arises where two parties agree, all right? In order to create a contract, there must be a mutual ascension of the minds. The contract must be mutually beneficial for both parties involved or all parties involved, all right? The language in the contract must be clear and unambiguous, right? The one who created the contract, should it ever be discovered that there's a discrepancy, he bears the burden. He who created the contract bears the loss, okay? Okay, so it's important to always remember that. Even as learned as I am, if somebody else wants to write up the contract after we make the agreement, I will allow them to do it. Even though I may be better at writing up the contract, I will allow the other party to do it, especially if they're a lawyer. An accord arises where two parties agree to settle some prior existing debt by the substitution of performance different from the original obligation. For example, in the example of the farmer who promised to sell his prize bull for $200 to his neighbor who didn't know the bull was dead, an accord could be reached if the owner of the dead bull promised to substitute his best sheepdog for the bull. If this agreement for a substitute is accepted, okay, an accord is reached. If the sheepdog is actually delivered as a substitute for the bull, there has also been satisfaction. Let me explain how this works for you guys with a mortgage and negotiable instruments. Promissory note created the debt, right? They're saying that debt's due and owing for whatever reason, even though we already know that there never was a loan, the mortgage is not in arrears, the bank refuses to produce the 1098, and every document they bring forward that isn't the original is in fact a forgery. Okay, we know these things. But knowing these things, maybe we just want to resolve the issue and put bygones to bygones. So what do? We offer them another instrument. We say, you know what? We'll just go ahead and give you a bill of exchange, an IBOE, an international bill of exchange. How about a letter of credit to wipe the debt? And after 72 hours, they don't send that letter of credit back to you, that bill of exchange back to you, that new promissory note back to you, then they accepted it, okay? So this is accord and satisfaction. We've created a new deal. Everybody's agreed to it at this point. Nobody's refuted or rejected it or rebutted it. Nobody's sent the note back to you. So now it's canceled the debt, okay? So this is part of accord and satisfaction. Now, if the disgruntled holder of the contract for the bull goes into court to sue for breach of contract, the defendant can raise the defense of accord and satisfaction. While it is true he promised a prize bull, it is also true that the buyer agreed to accept the sheepdog as a substitute for the bull. Delivery of the sheepdog as a substitute for the bull constituted an accord and satisfaction, a complete defense to breach of contract on the bull bargain. An accord and satisfaction erases the former obligation, okay? It's as though the contract never existed. We got a whole new deal in place, all right? And the earlier contract is as if it never existed. Now, you're getting those billing statements from the utility company, right? You're going to A for V the coupon, right? You're going to accept it for value, return for the same, fill it out like you would a check, flip it over, endorse the back, put your endorse the back as beneficiary, put your name on there, all rights reserved without recourse. You could even use UCC 3-402 and UCC, I think it's 415. And when you send it back, if they don't send you back that payment voucher, guess what? They accepted your form of payment. That's an accord and satisfaction, clean across the board, or you can call it an accepted for value if you like. It's an accord and satisfaction. I will tender this payment voucher back to you to settle the debt. Since the promise of a bull has been erased by acceptance of a sheepdog instead, think of it as a compromise. Performance of the second promise satisfies the first. This is only true, however, if there is first an accord, i.e., if the parties agree to a substitute in lieu of the first promise. The man owing a bull cannot unilaterally deliver the dog to discharge his debt unless the buyer first agrees to accept the dog in full satisfaction of the promise to deliver a bull. In other words, unilaterally means he can't by himself just decide, oh, well, I don't have a bull anymore, I'm going to give him the dog and that suffices, the deal is done. The man, even if he dropped off the dog and the guy said, I don't want the dog, he is still liable for the first contract entered into, which was the $200 for the bull. Just because the man offers the dog doesn't mean they now have an accord and satisfaction, and the man will still have grounds to bring suit, okay, for breach of contract. If the creditor accepts debtor's substitute promise and the debtor performs fully on the substitute promise, buyer loses his right to sue. There has been accord and satisfaction of the obligation original debt. If the debtor gets sued by the creditor after reaching an accord and delivering this substitute, he can file an affirmative defense to the complaint, which should be filed with his answer and not be delayed to a later time when it might be deemed waived. Remember, if you don't exercise your rights, if you slumber upon your rights, you lose or you waive your rights. And this little nifty thing called latches may occur. And if he is able to prove the accord and satisfaction, i.e., if he can prove the creditor agreed to take the substitute and can prove he delivered the substitute, then the debtor is absolved of all further liability on the debt. How do we do that? Well, the Bible, the good Lord told us 2 or more witnesses. So if you're going to do an accord and satisfaction, be sure to take a couple witnesses with you. Be sure to write up the new deal in accord and satisfaction in lieu of the bull for $200 that has been found dead out in the field. I am going to accept this prized sheepdog in lieu of the bull, and get both parties to sign. Make sure there's some type of witness there to witness your signatures, and now you have the evidence, okay? Elements. For a defendant to adequately plead the defense of accord and satisfaction, he must allege ultimate facts sufficient to establish the following elements. Number 1, existence of a pre-existing dispute over an enforceable obligation, i.e. a contract, okay? Number 2, both parties intended to settle their dispute by entering into a substitute agreement, okay? So again, contracts uttered or spoken or orally exhibited so often dissipate in the wind, and without witnesses to corroborate the contractual agreement, it's really hard to get enforcement in a court. So everything you're going to do, you're going to want to do on paper, ladies and gentlemen, because you will then have a record of it, and make sure that you have witnesses when you sign the agreement, okay? Now you have evidence that's admissible in court. Okay, it will still be tried. They may challenge the signatures or whatever, but if you have the witnesses there and you subpoena the witnesses and they can say on such and such day at such and such time, John Jackwagon signed a deal with Jack Mehoff, and they made an agreement. They made a contractual agreement. Okay, so that's where that saves you. 3, both parties acted in accordance with the substitute agreement, i.e., the debtor tendered and the creditor accepted the substitute performance agreed upon. If all 3 factual elements of this defense are proven to exist, debtor's obligations on the underlying debt should be discharged, and plaintiff's case is dismissed on the defendant's motion after hearing the presentation of evidence of the accord and satisfaction. Comments. In order to comprise a complete defense to the creditor's claim, the agreed upon performance must fully discharge the underlying debt. Partial satisfaction is no defense. When we come back, we'll be talking about accounting. Can you account? Are you account able? All right, we'll come back and we'll touch on accounting.